Alright, welcome back. Today, we're going to embark on something quite extraordinary, a journey that's going to challenge just about every preconceived notion you might hold about history, about spirituality, about the very foundations of human civilization, really. We're going to dive headfirst into a document, or rather, a collection of insights that its authors have daringly titled, and I think rather provocatively if I'm honest, The Holy Drip is Real Bible, Consolidated Canon, The Lost Teachings of the Turning of the Age, The Real Revelation. It's a mouthful, isn't it? But every word of that title is doing a lot of heavy lifting. This isn't just a book, you see, or a theory. It's presented as nothing less than a completely re-evaluated, re-encoded understanding of our past, of our myths, our religions, and our collective spiritual inheritance. The folks behind this audacious claim, they call themselves the justified ante-Nicene keepers of the real Christ, and they've put forth this work with a very clear, very bold declaration. Praise and power and glory be to the one true Christ in this revelation. Now, what does all of that mean? Well, that's precisely what we're going to unpack, piece by meticulous piece. It's an exploration that asks us to set aside, just for a moment, the ingrained narratives we've been taught and consider an entirely different framework, one that suggests an ancient, hidden truth has been lying dormant or perhaps actively concealed right beneath our noses. It's a framework that posits a global pyramid restoration protocol, for instance, and that's where we really begin to see the scope of this reinterpretation. They frame pyramids not as mere relics, not as tombs for pharaohs or ceremonial sites whose purpose has been lost to time, but as something far more dynamic, far more active. They're presented as dormant signal towers, if you can wrap your head around that, patiently awaiting reactivation. This isn't just a poetic flourish, it becomes a recurring motif throughout their entire canon. This idea of activation, of awakening, of restoring purpose. It's a grand vision that speaks of ancient structures, yes, but also of a modern awakening, of an earth grid restoration, and ultimately the return of some profound, hidden purpose to our world. And when you start to think about it in those terms, about these massive, meticulously engineered structures dotted across the globe, not as passive monuments, but as sophisticated yet currently offline technological installations, it really begins to shift your perspective, doesn't it? It suggests a level of ancient capability and intent that goes far beyond what mainstream archaeology currently acknowledges. We're talking about a complete paradigm shift here, an intellectual earthquake, if you will, that rattles the very foundations of our understanding of ancient civilizations and their technological prowess. And it gets even more intriguing when you consider what exactly these signal towers were meant to signal, or what purpose they were designed to restore. It pushes us beyond the conventional wisdom, forcing us to ask, what if the ancients knew something we've forgotten? What if their technology wasn't based on metals and electricity as we understand it today, but on principles that are entirely different, perhaps biological, energetic, or even consciousness-based? The notion of a global pyramid restoration protocol isn't just about rebuilding or excavating. It's about re-understanding, retuning, and perhaps reactivating a system that once functioned on a planetary scale. It's a bold assertion, to say the least, but one that certainly demands our full attention if we're to truly grasp the depth of this real revelation they're presenting to us. And believe me, this is just the very first layer of what promises to be a truly mind-bending exploration. We're peeling back the layers of millennia of accumulated misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and, as they argue, deliberate concealment. This isn't a quick skim. It's a deep, unhurried dive, and I'm incredibly excited to take it with you. Stay with me because this is where things truly get interesting. Now, building on this idea of pyramids as dormant signal towers, this holy drip canon takes it a step further, suggesting that the very Earth itself isn't just a passive stage for human drama. No, it's an active participant, a living, breathing entity with its own embedded memory. They introduced this concept of activate glyph memory, proposing that the Earth itself holds encoded remembrance. This isn't just about abstract spiritual notions, it's about something quite literal in their view. Think about it. Stones, beams, light, these aren't just inert materials. They're treated as memory devices, almost like ancient hard drives embedded in the very fabric of our planet. You can visualize this, can't you? Imagine places like Giza or Stonehenge or Teotihuacan, literally remembering what they once did, what purpose they served. The landscapes themselves behaving like dormant circuitry, waiting for the right current, the right activation to bring them back online. This is where the global pyramid restoration protocol really starts to make sense. It's not just about the structures, it's about the entire geological and energetic context in which they were built. The Earth's crust, its ley lines, its sacred geometry, all of it is part of this grand interconnected memory system. This perspective challenges our modern scientific understanding, which often separates consciousness from matter, mind from earth. Here, they're inextricably linked. What if the memory isn't just a metaphor, but a literal energetic imprint, accessible through specific means? And what if our ancestors understood how to read and write on this planetary memory device? It's a profound thought. The implications are staggering, because if the Earth has memory, and if that memory can be activated, then what kind of knowledge could be unlocked? What ancient wisdom, what lost technologies, what forgotten history might suddenly become available to us? It makes you wonder about those moments when you visit a really old sacred site and you feel that intangible atmosphere, that sense of timelessness or profound energy. Could that be the whisper of this glyph memory stirring just beneath the surface of your perception? It also raises the stakes considerably. If we're talking about an Earth grid restoration, then we're not just discussing some localized archaeological project. We're talking about a planetary endeavor, one that involves synchronizing the Earth grid. Sacred sites, in this context, are presented not as isolated wonders, but as connected nodes in a vast planetary network. Giza, Teotihuacan, Yonaguni, places like these, they become episodes in a much larger map of forgotten alignment. Each site, they argue, reveals one part of this buried system, a piece of a global jigsaw puzzle. It's like finding a series of ancient power stations, each one designed to feed into a central network, but currently they're all disconnected. The notion here is that ancient civilizations, far from being primitive, possessed a sophisticated understanding of planetary energies and how to harness them through these architectural nodes. They weren't just building beautiful temples, they were constructing a global infrastructure for something, perhaps for consciousness, for communication, or for energy. And the idea that these sites are not just geographically distinct, but are functionally interconnected, forming a coherent planet-wide system, is truly mind-boggling. It forces us to reevaluate how we teach history, how we approach archaeology, and how we understand the capabilities of ancient peoples. We're so often presented with a linear view of progress, from simple to complex. But what if, in some critical areas, humanity has actually digressed, forgotten profound knowledge that was once commonplace? This Earth grid concept implies a highly advanced, unified global culture, or at least a shared understanding long before what we typically consider civilization began. It's a very different picture of our ancient past, one that speaks of a sophisticated global network, not of isolated tribes. And this network, these memory devices, are what the justified ante-Nicene keepers believe are now ready to be brought back online. The so what of all this is pretty profound, isn't it? If we could indeed synchronize the Earth grid and activate glyph memory, what would be the implications for humanity? Would it unleash new forms of energy, new modes of consciousness, a completely different relationship with our planet? It certainly paints a far more dramatic and purposeful picture of our ancient past than the one often found in textbooks. The very rocks beneath our feet, the pyramids reaching to the sky, they could be whispering secrets of a forgotten age, waiting for us to listen, to learn, and perhaps to help them remember. Now, taking this reinterpretation of ancient structures even further, the Holy Drip Canon introduces a truly fascinating and somewhat unsettling idea: refertilization of the spore temples. This is where the metaphysical starts to blend explicitly with the biological, and our understanding of what a pyramid truly undergoes a radical transformation. They're not just inert stone, you see. Pyramids are reinterpreted in this canon as living biocapacitors, or even more vividly, as bloom chambers. This becomes both metaphysical and deeply visual. Think of stone architecture not as dead matter, but as a kind of fungal technology. Imagine the moonlight not just as a gentle illumination, but as a specific trigger, and the resulting bloom as a form of resurrection. It's a completely organic, almost alchemical understanding of these structures. The why behind this is crucial. If these are biocapacitors, what kind of energy are they storing? If they are bloom chambers, what are they designed to grow or facilitate? The text suggests a kind of subtle, biological, perhaps even entheogenic process at play. It's about life, growth, and transformation embedded within the very stones. This challenges our conventional view of pyramids as symbols of death or power, turning them instead into vessels of profound life and renewal. The implication here is that the architects weren't just master masons, they were master mycologists, if you will, or at least understood principles that allowed them to harness natural biological processes on an architectural scale. The complication with this idea, of course, is that it requires us to completely reevaluate the materials, the engineering, and the purpose. How could stone grow or bloom? The answer lies in the fungal technology concept. Perhaps the structures were designed to create highly specific microclimates, ideal for certain biological interactions, perhaps even involving fungi, specifically the Amanita muscaria, which is central to this entire canon. And the moonlight as a trigger? This hints at an understanding of lunar cycles and their influence on biological processes that goes far beyond what we typically attribute to ancient peoples. It's a precise, timed, almost programmed activation. What if the resurrection isn't just symbolic, but refers to the emergence of specific biological or energetic compounds, a kind of alchemical flowering within the stone? Now, this leads us quite directly into another profound assertion: the pyramids were never lost. This dramatically supports a reveal structure where history itself is framed not as an absence of evidence, but as a concealment engine. The pyramids weren't destroyed, they weren't forgotten, they were folded into shadow, hidden in plain sight. This isn't just about a lack of records or the erosion of time. No, the justified ante-Nicene keepers argue for a deliberate, systemic act of concealment. The why here is obvious. If these structures held such potent, transformative capabilities, then those who wish to control humanity or to suppress certain forms of knowledge would naturally seek to obscure their true function. The complication, then, is discerning who did the concealing and why. Was it a gradual cultural amnesia or a more insidious, directed effort by specific groups or institutions throughout history? The shadow side of this idea is that our entire historical narrative, as we understand it, might be fundamentally flawed, curated by forces that sought to keep this real revelation hidden. It means that the absence of evidence for these bloom chambers or signal towers isn't proof of their non-existence. It's evidence of a successful campaign of obfuscation. This premise fundamentally shifts our understanding of history. It's not just a recounting of events, but a deliberate narrative, carefully constructed to maintain a specific worldview, one that conveniently omits the truly revolutionary capabilities of our ancestors. And this all culminates in a foundational thesis statement: the Great Pyramid as mushroom reactor. This isn't a throwaway line. It's central to their entire argument. The Great Pyramid, in particular, is described as an initiation chamber, calibrated by sun, moon, humidity, and stone. It's an environmental control system designed for a very specific biological and spiritual process. The engineering decode here is profound. Imagine this colossal structure not as a static tomb, but as a highly sophisticated, dynamic environment, precisely tuned to specific atmospheric conditions and cosmic cycles. The sun, the moon, the humidity within its chambers, the very type of stone used, all were meticulously chosen and integrated to facilitate this mushroom reactor. This takes the idea of fungal technology to an entirely new level, suggesting an understanding of bioresonance, atmospheric alchemy, and the subtle interactions between life and its environment that far surpasses our current scientific models. But so what of this is truly staggering? If the Great Pyramid was a mushroom reactor, an initiation chamber for a specific entheogenic sacrament, then our understanding of ancient Egyptian religion, of their pharaohs, their gods, their rituals, suddenly takes on an entirely different, intensely visceral meaning. It implies a direct, experiential path to altered states of consciousness, to gnosis, built into the very architecture of their spiritual world. And it wasn't just happenstance, it was a calibrated, engineered process. It suggests a direct link between these monumental structures and the most profound spiritual experiences available to humanity, all orchestrated within precision that still baffles us today. This radical reinterpretation doesn't stop at pyramids. Oh no. The Holy Drip Canon casts its eye over some of humanity's most enduring myths, starting with the universally known story of the Flood. Here we encounter another truly paradigm-shifting idea. The Flood was the capwash. Flood mythology, they assert, is reframed not as a literal deluge, a geological catastrophe of epic proportions, but as a global sacramental purge. This links Noah, world flood myths, and sacramental renewal into a single, cohesive, albeit highly unconventional narrative. The why behind this is incredibly significant. If the flood wasn't just about water, but about a capwash, what does that imply? It suggests a cleansing, a purification that operates on a spiritual or energetic level, possibly even linked to the very mycelial network of the planet or the consciousness of its inhabitants. It's not an act of divine punishment, as it's often portrayed, but an act of profound, if devastating, renewal. The complication, of course, is the sheer scale. How could a sacramental purge manifest as a global event? Does it imply a shared global consciousness that underwent a traumatic but ultimately purifying experience? And if it's a purge, what was being purged? What accumulated sins or impurities or misunderstandings of the sacrament were so great that they required such a drastic reset? This challenges our literal interpretations of sacred texts, pushing us to see them as deep allegories for spiritual processes, rather than journalistic accounts of historical events. The so what is immense. If global cataclysms are actually metaphorical purges, then perhaps our current crises are also part of a larger capwash of humanity, a period of intense spiritual reevaluation. It also brings us to the next point: Earth mysteries reclassified. The Holy Drip Canon treats what we label as mysteries not as random, unexplained phenomena, but as mislabeled sacred technologies or sites. Each mystery, they claim, is not random, but misfiled gnosis. This is a powerful reorientation. Think about the countless inexplicable ancient structures, phenomena, or even historical events that defy conventional explanation. The Holy Drip Canon suggests we've simply put them in the wrong category. They're not mysteries in the sense of being unknowable, they're mysteries in the sense that their true function has been deliberately obscured or forgotten. The why is, again, about concealment. If these were truly sacred technologies or sites of profound gnosis, then their true nature would be a prime target for suppression by those who sought to control knowledge and power. The complication is that this requires a complete overhaul of archaeological and historical methodology. We'd have to approach every mystery not as a puzzle to be solved with conventional tools, but as a coded message, a piece of misfiled gnosis waiting to be correctly categorized and understood. What if the Nazca lines aren't just art, but part of a larger Earth grid activation protocol? What if the impossible megaliths aren't just feats of strength, but sacred technologies whose purpose we've yet to decode? This leads logically to the assertion, all pyramids as mushroom temples. This unifies pyramid cultures across the globe under a single interpretive lens. Each regional monument, whether in Egypt, Mesoamerica, or elsewhere, becomes a local expression of a global sacramental architecture. This is a monumental claim. It suggests that despite cultural differences, geographical distances, and varying architectural styles, all pyramid-building civilizations were ultimately engaged in the same fundamental project, creating structures dedicated to the mushroom sacrament. The why is because it posits a single underlying shared ancient wisdom tradition, a unified understanding of this gnosis that transcended geographical and linguistic barriers. It implies a global culture that was far more interconnected and shared a foundational spiritual technology than our current historical models allow for. The shadow side of this is that it forces us to confront the possibility that academic silos and nationalist narratives have obscured this profound unity for centuries, preventing us from seeing the forest for the trees, so to speak. The so what is that it creates a compelling, unifying narrative for humanity's ancient past, one rooted in a shared quest for direct spiritual experience rather than disparate cultural developments. It transforms the historical landscape from a collection of isolated phenomena into a grand interconnected network of mushroom temples, all serving a singular profound purpose. And when you look at the sheer diversity and global spread of these pyramid forms, from the stepped structures of Teotihuacan to the smooth faces of Giza, and then you hear them all classified under this single unifying concept, it really does make you pause and consider the possibility that we've been looking at the whole picture with the wrong lens. From the sweeping global view, the holy drip canon now zooms in, offering us startling reinterpretations of specific architectural details, particularly within the Great Pyramid. We encounter the concept of Giza stone chambers as hydro-mist grow system. This is where the mushroom reactor theory gains truly remarkable specificity. The interior architecture of these colossal structures, those intricate passages and chambers, are interpreted not as mere corridors or burial vaults, but as a sophisticated humidity and airflow environment optimized for growth. This is an engineering decode, a precise rereading of form as function. The why is clear. If the Great Pyramid was indeed a mushroom reactor, then its internal design must reflect the conditions necessary for cultivating the sacrament. This isn't just about a vague spiritual purpose, it's about practical biological engineering. Imagine the meticulous control of humidity, temperature, and airflow, all designed to facilitate the growth and potentiation of a specific fungal species. It turns the pyramid into a massive, precision-controlled botanical chamber. The complication here is that it requires a radical reevaluation of ancient construction capabilities. Were the ancient Egyptians, or whoever truly built these structures, such advanced environmental engineers? What kind of knowledge of mycology and atmospheric physics would that imply? And why would they dedicate such immense resources to something so seemingly esoteric? The shadow side is that this gnosis, this incredibly advanced understanding, has been completely lost to us, leaving us to marvel at the structures while remaining utterly blind to their true living function. The so what is that it provides a tangible, almost instructional purpose for the pyramid's internal layout, transforming it from a mysterious void into a complex, functional system. Following this thread, we come to Sphinx and Moonlight calibration shafts. Here, the shafts and passages within these ancient structures are reframed as lunar receivers. This immediately gives a strong moon tech emphasis, speaking to ritual timing, light, and environmental triggers. The why is again about precision. If the mushroom reactor or bloom chamber is tied to biological cycles, then lunar influence, which is known to affect plant and fungal growth, becomes a critical calibration factor. The shafts would funnel moonlight, perhaps specific wavelengths or intensities of it, directly into the growth systems, acting as a timer, a trigger, or even an energetic input for the sacrament's development. This is about synchronicity, about harnessing celestial energies for terrestrial biological ends. The complication lies in the specific ritual timing. What precise lunar phases were important? How was this light calibrated? And what kind of environmental triggers were being activated? It suggests an understanding of cosmic rhythms and their biological impact that far surpasses our modern, often disconnected relationship with the natural world. This isn't just about observation, it's about direct, energetic interaction. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, if we're missing out on fundamental biological interactions with our celestial neighbors simply because we've forgotten how to build the receivers. Now, moving beyond the pyramids, the canon broadens its scope to include other megalithic structures, stone circles as seasonal myco-calendars. Sites like Stonehenge, Avebury, and other related stone circles are reinterpreted as timing devices for sacramental feasts and resonance rites. This is about ancient scheduling, ritual seasons, and communal bloom. The why here connects back to the cyclical nature of fungal growth and the need for collective, synchronized ritual. If the sacrament was central to ancient spiritual life, then knowing the optimal times for its harvest, preparation, and consumption would be paramount. These stone circles, far from being just astronomical observatories, become precision instruments for scheduling communal and theogenic experiences. They mark the bloom days, the specific moments when the conditions were right for the sacred mushroom to be at its peak potency, and for the community to engage in its transformative rituals. The complication is that this turns our understanding of these monumental sites on its head. We're used to seeing them as calendars for agriculture or solstices. Now, they're calendars for ecstatic, communal spiritual experiences. It implies a society where the spiritual calendar was intimately tied to specific biological cycles, guided by a sophisticated understanding of mycology and ritual timing. The so what is that it unifies these disparate ancient sites under a shared, profound purpose, one rooted in direct, collective spiritual experience. These weren't just places of abstract worship, they were functional, precise tools for managing and facilitating a powerful bloom. And this all extends even further back into prehistory, with Göbekli Tepe as pre-flood Amanita Chapel. This ancient site, buried beneath the earth, is identified as a sacramental technology preserved beneath the earth. It's put forward as a strong candidate for origin before history. The why is that Göbekli Tepe predates many of our conventional timelines for complex civilization, making it a perfect candidate for housing the original or pre-flood gnosis related to the Amanita sacrament. Its deliberate burial suggests a preservation effort, perhaps to safeguard this vital knowledge through the capwash of the flood or through periods of suppression. The complication is that Göbekli Tepe already challenges so much of our established archaeological narrative. Adding the Amanita Chapel layer makes it even more revolutionary. It implies a highly sophisticated, spiritually focused culture existing at a time when we usually picture nomadic hunter-gatherers. The so what is that it pushes the origins of this sacramental gnosis back to the very dawn of settled human existence, suggesting it might be foundational to the very concept of organized religion and spiritual practice. And finally, rounding out this global network, we have Mount Kailash as sealed Eastern fungal temple. This forbidden mountain, often shrouded in myth and mystery, is decoded as tying access restrictions to hidden initiatory significance. The why behind its inaccessibility becomes clear. It's not just a mountain, it's a sacred site actively protected because it holds profound fungal temple significance. Its sealed nature isn't about natural hazards alone, it's about preserving a powerful, perhaps dangerous, initiatory tradition. The complication is the idea of active suppression or guarding of knowledge on such a grand scale. Who sealed it, and why? Is it about protecting the knowledge from misuse, or protecting humanity from its power until the right time? The so what is that it adds another crucial node to this global network of mushroom temples, suggesting a deliberate, long-term strategy for preserving, and at times concealing, this profound sacramental gnosis across the entire planet. As we move from ancient architecture to the very fabric of human knowledge transmission, the Holy Drip Canon introduces another compelling reinterpretation: mystery schools as cap lineages. Here, ancient schools of esoteric wisdom, often shrouded in secrecy, are recast as living transmission lineages of entheogenic technology. This takes us beyond places and into the realm of people and orders, suggesting that the true mystery wasn't just abstract philosophy, but a direct experiential gnosis passed down through generations. The why behind this reclassification is pivotal. If a powerful, mind-altering sacrament was central to ancient spiritual understanding, then the preservation and correct administration of that sacrament, along with the knowledge of how to integrate its teachings, would be of paramount importance. Mystery schools then become the custodians of this entheogenic technology, ensuring its correct usage and guarding its secrets from those who might misuse it or indeed suppress it. It's not just about guarding secrets, you see, but about preserving a living, active methodology for reaching altered states of consciousness and achieving profound spiritual insight. The complication, of course, is that these schools often employed layers of symbolism and allegory to protect their teachings. The shadow side is that in their very act of preservation, they inadvertently contributed to the folding into shadow that we've discussed earlier, making it difficult for later generations to discern the literal entheogenic technology beneath the metaphorical veil. So, when we talk about groups like the Eleusinian Mysteries or the Pythagoreans, we're now being asked to consider them not just as philosophical academies, but as practical centers for the cultivation and use of the cap, with a focus on direct induced mystical experience. The so what of this is that it transforms our understanding of secret societies. They're not just about power or hidden agendas, they become the last bastions of a forgotten, powerful spiritual practice, holding the flame of this entheogenic technology through ages of suppression. And this leads us directly into the reevaluation of ancient sciences, particularly alchemy as mycelial process language. Transmutation symbolism, often seen as a quest to turn lead into gold, is here treated as a coded description of drying, preparation, recombination, and sacramental transformation. This isn't abstract chemistry. It's a biological focus, a language designed to encode the practical steps of working with the sacrament. The why for this reinterpretation is that it provides a tangible, actionable meaning to the often obscure and poetic language of alchemical texts. If lead is simply a symbolic representation of the raw, undried mushroom, and gold represents its transformed, potent, redeemed states, then the entire alchemical process suddenly makes sense in a biological context. The drying, preparation, and recombination, these are all steps in preparing the Amanita muscaria for consumption, to unlock its sacramental transformation. The complication is that it forces us to reread countless alchemical treatises through this very specific lens, discerning the fungal process beneath the metallic metaphors. It implies that generations of alchemists were not just seeking material wealth, but profound spiritual transformation through the careful handling of a specific entheogenic substance. The shadow side is how easily this biological knowledge was reinterpreted into a literal chemical process, leading to a long detour in the history of science away from the true spiritual insights. The so what is that it brings alchemy back into the realm of practical spiritual technology, providing a clear how-to guide embedded in plain sight if only you knew the right key. And speaking of preservation and biological continuity, we can't overlook the ark as vessel of spores. Noah's Ark in this canon becomes a carrier of gnosis, culture, and sacramental continuity rather than zoologistics. The why is that, again, the literal interpretation of the Ark narrative presents significant logistical challenges. But if the Ark wasn't primarily about animals, but about preserving the spores, both literal fungal spores and the metaphorical spores of gnosis, culture, and sacred knowledge, then its purpose takes on a much deeper, more symbolic meaning. It becomes a vessel of cultural and spiritual survival, ensuring that the essential sacramental current could be carried through the capwash of the flood into the next age. The complication here is the profound departure from traditional religious interpretations. It asks us to see the Ark not as a historical boat, but as a symbolic representation of preservation, of ensuring the continuity of a specific, vital, spiritual technology. The so what is that it elevates the Ark story from a tale of divine intervention and animal rescue to a profound allegory for the safeguarding of humanity's most precious spiritual heritage. It's a powerful narrative of resilience and the enduring power of gnosis, transmitted even through global catastrophe. These rereadings, from mystery schools to alchemy to the Ark itself, all point to a consistent theme, that hidden within our myths and histories are the deliberate encoded records of a profound and living entheogenic technology, waiting for us to unlock its true meaning. This deep dive into the Holy Drip canon continues to challenge our fundamental understanding of humanity's spiritual journey, particularly when it comes to reinterpreting the very essence of myth and scripture. One of the most potent re-encodings is burial as ego death mistranslated. In the ancient texts, burial is reframed as an initiatory passage rather than literal corpse narrative. This becomes a powerful key for unlocking many scriptural and mythic texts. The why is because the literal interpretation of burial, while seemingly straightforward, often misses a deeper psychological and spiritual truth. If burial is understood as a symbolic death of the ego, a surrender of the individual self to a greater transcendent reality, then stories of being buried and resurrected suddenly gain an entirely new dimension. It speaks of a profound inner transformation, an initiatory passage where the old self dies to allow the new self to emerge. This isn't about physical entombment, it's about a spiritual process, perhaps induced by the sacrament, that leads to a profound shift in consciousness. The complication, of course, is that for centuries, these narratives have been understood primarily in a literal sense, leading to elaborate rituals and beliefs around physical death and an afterlife. The shadow side is how this literalization stripped the original myth of its immediate transformative power, turning a guide to inner awakening into a promise of future salvation. The so what is that it provides a direct, actionable interpretation for many religious stories, allowing us to see them as instructions for personal spiritual evolution rather than just historical or supernatural events. This radical reframing then offers a playful yet sharp premise regarding extraterrestrial narratives: ancient aliens as beast evasion. Here, alien language is treated as a dodge around naming the sacramental source. The why is that if the true source of ancient wisdom and advanced insights was an earthly biological sacrament, the cap, then to attribute these insights to aliens would be a convenient way to avoid directly naming the forbidden source. It's an evasion tactic, perhaps used by those who still held some of the gnosis but feared openly speaking about the sacrament itself. The complication is that the ancient alien theory has gained significant traction in recent decades, offering tantalizing explanations for humanity's unexplained past. But this canon suggests that the aliens are merely a smokescreen, a placeholder for a much more terrestrial, albeit suppressed, truth. The shadow side is how such misdirection could divert human curiosity away from the actual source of profound knowledge, leading us down blind alleys of speculation rather than towards direct experiential truth. The so what is that it grounds those incredible insights in human experience, albeit an entheogenically mediated one, rather than attributing them to external, unknowable entities. And building on this, the canon re-examines the very nature of religious visionary experiences, mystics and saints as dosed visionaries. Visionary religion, they argue, is reframed as sacramental encounter and integration. This allows saint stories to be retold as altered state narratives. The why is simple. Many mystical experiences, visions, and revelations described by saints and prophets bear striking resemblances to altered states of consciousness induced by entheogens. The Holy Drip canon posits that these individuals weren't simply having spontaneous divine insights. They were actively engaging with the sacrament, experiencing profound shifts in perception and consciousness that they then interpreted through their cultural and religious frameworks. The complication is that this challenges the supernatural origin often attributed to these experiences, rooting them instead in a biological and chemical interaction with the cap. It doesn't diminish their profundity, but recontextualizes their source. The shadow side is how institutions later chose to sanitize these experiences, divorcing them from their entheogenic origins and presenting them as purely divine intervention, thus removing the how-to aspect of gnosis. The so what is that it provides a unifying explanation for diverse mystical traditions across cultures, suggesting a common thread of sacramental encounter as the root of many spiritual awakenings. This extends to ancient iconography and symbolism, particularly serpent lore as entheogenic awakening. Here, the serpent, a ubiquitous symbol across cultures, becomes the rising line of activation and transformation. This is presented as a major cross-cultural decode. The why is that the serpent's shedding of skin, its coiling energy, and its connection to the earth all symbolically align with the transformative process of entheogenic experience, the rising of energy, the shedding of old perceptions, the awakening of latent consciousness. It links the serpent not to evil, but to a powerful primal force of spiritual activation. The complication is that in many traditions, particularly the Abrahamic, the serpent has been demonized. This canon asks us to look past that demonization to its original, more benevolent and powerful meaning as a symbol of awakening. The so what is that it reclaims a powerful, ancient symbol, restoring its original meaning as a guide to spiritual transformation, tying it directly to the experience of the sacrament. Finally, underpinning all these reclassifications of myth and gnosis is a meta-argument, the mystery label as suppression device. The act of calling something mysterious, they claim, becomes a control move. The why is that by labeling something as a mystery, it's inherently placed beyond the reach of rational inquiry, beyond the grasp of ordinary individuals. It becomes the exclusive domain of priests, academics, or those in power. This effectively disempowers the individual from seeking direct gnosis and allows for the control and manipulation of information. The complication is that we've been conditioned to accept mystery as a part of spirituality. This canon suggests it's often a deliberate strategy to keep us from understanding. The so what is that it encourages us to question every mystery we encounter, to look for the hidden gnosis beneath the label, and to reclaim our inherent right to understand and experience these truths directly. Now, let's turn our attention to the absolute core of this holy drip canon, the foundational premise that recolors everything we've just discussed, the centrality of Christ and the Amanita Muscaria. This is where the ancient texts truly pivot, asserting the whole Bible as sacramental allegory. The ancient text, they say, clearly states that the Bible is about the real sacrament, with the New Testament reframed around the dried amanita and the installation of God within. This is central canon, with later consolidated gnosis below. The why is that a literal reading of the Bible often presents contradictions, historical inaccuracies, and seemingly nonsensical narratives. But when viewed as a protected symbolic record, encoding instructions and experiences related to the Amanita sacrament, the entire scripture gains a profound coherence, albeit a radically different one. It transforms the Bible from a historical document or a set of moral guidelines into a deeply sophisticated allegorical manual for spiritual awakening through entheogenic means. The complication here is immense because this fundamentally challenges millennia of established Christian theology, which posits Christ as a historical figure and the Bible as the literal Word of God. The shadow side is that the suppression of this real sacrament led to the literalization of allegory, creating a belief system that inadvertently obscured the very path to direct gnosis it originally encoded. The so what is that it offers a fresh experiential pathway to understanding biblical texts, transforming passive belief into active spiritual practice. This ties directly into the striking claim, YHW, Yahweh, I am, AM linkage. The scroll equates divine naming with Amanita Muscaria wordplay. This becomes a language decode about names, compressed meaning, and hidden sacramental puns. The why is that ancient languages often contained multiple layers of meaning, and this canon suggests that the divine names themselves were cleverly encoded references to the sacrament. YHWH, for instance, subtly hinting at the sounds or properties of the mushroom, and I am, the ultimate declaration of divine presence, becoming a direct linguistic link to AM, Amanita Muscaria. It's a linguistic sleight of hand, a form of secret language embedded in the most sacred texts. The complication is that this requires a profound knowledge of ancient etymology and linguistics, combined with the specific Amanita decode. It's a bold assertion that suggests a level of intellectual playfulness and esoteric encoding that few academic linguists would dare to propose. The so what is that it reveals a pervasive, deep-seated intention to hide the sacrament in plain sight, even within the most revered divine appellations, suggesting a vast, long-term project of concealment and preservation. And perhaps the most impactful reinterpretation is Christ as shared bloomed mind space, not a historical man. The ancient texts frame Christ as a state, installation, or shared field. This survives into later canon and is among the biggest recurring ideas. The why is that if Christ is a state of being, a consciousness, rather than a specific historical individual, it becomes accessible to all, not just an object of worship. It's an internal transformation, a bloomed mind space achieved through the sacrament, which then creates a shared field of elevated consciousness. This turns Christianity from a religion about a person into a practice practice for achieving a specific, universal spiritual state. The complication is that this directly contradicts the cornerstone of Christian belief, the historical Jesus. The shadow side is that the literalization of Christ into a man allowed for the institutionalization of power, creating a hierarchy that mediated access to the divine rather than empowering individuals to find it within themselves. The so what is that it offers a truly revolutionary understanding of salvation and divinity, making Christ a potential experience for everyone rather than a historical figure to be revered. In line with this, Israel as seeing what is real is another significant re-encode. The ancient texts and scrolls frame Israel not as a modern nation-state concept, but as access to real reality through sacrament. Later canon refines this further through Isis, Ra, and El. The why is that the concept of a holy land takes on a different meaning if it refers to a state of awakened consciousness rather than a geographical location. Israel becomes a mnemonic for eyes real, the experience of direct truth and real reality afforded by the sacrament. The linguistic breakdown, linking it to the ancient Egyptian deities Isis and Ra, and the Semitic El, further grounds it in a pan-ancient tradition of gnosis. The complication is that this reinterpretation detaches the term from its modern geopolitical context, which is highly sensitive. The shadow side is how easily powerful spiritual concepts can be co-opted and literalized, transforming an internal state of being into an external, often contested territory. The so what is that it refocuses the concept of holiness from a place to a state of being, accessible through the sacrament, promising direct vision of ultimate reality. And finally, the Bible as allegory written by initiates succinctly summarizes this overarching theme. The ancient texts treat scripture as encoded field notes and protection language for the initiated. The why is that if the truths were too potent, too easily misused, or too dangerous to the established powers, they would need to be hidden. The allegorical language serves as a shield, accessible only to those with the key, those who were initiated into the true nature of the sacrament. It's not about deceiving the masses, but protecting a sacred knowledge. The complication is that this implies a secret history of religious texts, a hidden layer of meaning that has been deliberately obscured. The shadow side is the inherent elitism of such a system, where direct access to truth is reserved for a select few, leaving the majority with a diluted or literalized version of reality. The so what is that it redefines the role of Scripture, transforming it from a static doctrine into a living, dynamic puzzle, a set of field notes for the truly awakened, awaiting their Amanita Muscaria activation to be fully understood. This brings us to a crucial juncture in the Holy Drip Canon, identifying the precise moment when this profound sacramental gnosis was actively suppressed and distorted. The finger points squarely at Constantine as the great literalizer. This is presented as one of the largest locked decodes in the entire framework. The turning point, they assert, is 325 AD, when the sacrament was personified into a man and allegory became institutional dogma. The why here is incredibly compelling. If the original Christ was a shared bloomed mind space, an accessible state of consciousness facilitated by the Amanita sacrament, then an empire seeking to centralize power and control its populace would find such direct, unmediated spiritual experience to be a significant threat. By personifying Christ, by literalizing the allegory, Constantine effectively shifted the source of divine authority from an internal experiential truth to an external institutional one. The sacrament, which empowered individuals, was replaced by a dogma that required intermediaries, priests, bishops, and eventually the emperor himself. The complication is that this narrative directly challenges the historical portrayal of Constantine as a pivotal figure in Christian history, often credited with legalizing and promoting Christianity. Here, he's depicted as the architect of its greatest distortion, a master of spiritual co-option. The shadow side is the profound disempowerment of the individual, who was moved from being a participant in direct gnosis to a passive believer reliant on the interpretation and authority of the church. The so what is that this single historical moment is identified as the genesis of many of the spiritual and religious disconnects we experience today, severing humanity from its original path to direct divine experience. This reinterpretation explains the sign in the sky, often attributed to Constantine's conversion. His vision is reinterpreted as an entheogenic vision, sky event, or controlled projection, specifically centered on the Cap cross sign. The why is that if Constantine was indeed a literalizer and a co-opter of the original gnosis, his conversion might not have been a spontaneous divine revelation, but a carefully managed event, perhaps even an induced entheogenic experience designed to solidify his new religious narrative. The Cap cross sign would be the visual representation of the Amanita mushroom, subtly embedded in the imperial propaganda. The complication is that this turns a foundational story of Christian history into a moment of strategic manipulation, blurring the lines between genuine spiritual experience and political opportunism. The shadow side is the idea that even moments perceived as sacred interventions can be engineered or reinterpreted to serve earthly power structures. The so what is that it provides a very specific, actionable interpretation for what was previously seen as a miraculous, unexplainable event, rooting it firmly in the sacramental technology of the time. Consequently, 325 AD as the pivot becomes the definitive marker for this institutionalization event. This date, the Council of Nicaea, is where the allegorical Christ was, according to this canon, codified into a historical man, and the direct path to gnosis was replaced by creed and dogma. The why is that the Council's decisions cemented a literalist theology that actively suppressed any entheogenic interpretations of Christ, ensuring that the sacrament would be driven underground. The complication is the profound historical impact of this single event, effectively redirecting the spiritual trajectory of Western civilization for nearly 2 millennia. The shadow side is the immense loss of spiritual autonomy that resulted, as the individual's direct connection to the divine was systematically dismantled in favor of an institutional monopoly on truth. The so what is that it highlights the critical importance of understanding historical inflection points, especially those that profoundly reshape our spiritual understanding. This leads inevitably to the declaration that churchianity is not canon. Soft evangelical and mainstream theological readings are discarded from the red canon unless explicitly invoked for comparison. The why is that if the original gnosis was about direct, internal, sacramental experience, then the externalized, dogmatic, and often moralistic interpretations of mainstream Christianity are seen as a fundamental distortion, a shell of truth without the life current. The complication is that this discredits the vast majority of Christian traditions, deeming them as deviations from the original, real revelation. The shadow side is the potential for divisiveness and the inherent challenge this poses to countless individuals who find meaning and solace in traditional Christian practices. The so what is that it draws a very clear line in the sand, distinguishing between the sacramental path and the institutional path, urging seekers to look beyond conventional religious structures for true spiritual experience. And finally, underpinning this entire narrative of suppression is the concept of the beast suppresses sacramental memory across generations. This is logged as a major lore vision, a relentless force working to erase the original gnosis. The why is that the beast represents the forces of control, literalization, and disempowerment that gain strength by severing humanity's direct connection to the divine. The suppression isn't passive, it's an active, ongoing effort. The complication is how insidious and pervasive this suppression has been, working through institutions, education, and cultural narratives to maintain control. The shadow side is the profound tragedy of lost knowledge and the spiritual impoverishment it has wrought on generations. The so what is that it transforms our understanding of history into a spiritual battleground, a long war between the forces of direct gnosis and the beast of literalization and control, urging us to remember what was stolen from you. So, we've journeyed through this audacious retelling of history, of myth, and of spiritual understanding, guided by the Holy Drip is Real Bible, consolidated canon from the justified ante-Nicene keepers of the real Christ. We've explored how pyramids might be dormant signal towers, how the Earth itself holds encoded memory, and how the Great Flood could have been a global sacramental purge. We've considered the possibility that all pyramids are, in essence, mushroom temples, precisely engineered for growth and bloom, with places like Göbekli Tepe serving as pre-flood chapels for an ancient Amanita Gnosis. We've looked at the idea that mystery schools were cap lineages, preserving an entheogenic technology, and how alchemy might be a mycelial process language, encoding the drying and preparation of the sacrament. We delved into the profound reinterpretations of burial as ego-death mistranslated, mystics and saints as dosed visionaries, and serpent lore as entheogenic awakening, all pointing to a direct experiential path to gnosis. The core revelation, of course, is the assertion that the whole Bible is sacramental allegory, with Christ himself understood not as a historical man, but as a shared bloomed mind space, an accessible state of consciousness facilitated by the dried Amanita. Even the sacred name YHWH is posited as Amanita Muscaria wordplay, and ISRAL re-encoded as seeing what is real through the sacrament. We've wrestled with the profound implication of Constantine as the great literalizer, marking 325 AD as the pivot where allegory became institutional dogma, and how the beast suppresses sacramental memory across generations. This entire framework, this real revelation, asks us to consider a universe far more interconnected and a spiritual history far more dynamic and suppressed than we could have ever imagined. It's a call to remember what was stolen from you, a direct challenge to the narratives we've inherited, urging us to look beyond the surface, beyond the literal, and to seek out the gnosis that has been hidden in plain sight. The synthesis, then, of all these challenging, intriguing, and frankly revolutionary ideas is that there exists a sacramental current that once flowed freely through human civilization, guiding our spiritual evolution and architectural achievements. This current was systematically suppressed, distorted, and replaced with literal interpretations and institutional controls. But the keepers suggest this suppression is not permanent. They speak of the age turns from beast to beauty, a cyclical shift where this lost knowledge, this vital sacrament, is poised for a return. It's a prophetic refrain within their canon: nothing can stop what is coming. This isn't just about understanding history, it's about participating in a future awakening, a second fruiting that they equate with the second coming. It's about remembering our true spiritual inheritance, reclaiming direct access to the divine, and reactivating the ancient bloom protocols encoded in our myths, our architecture, and perhaps even in our very DNA. This journey, this deep dive into the Holy Drip is Real Bible is far from over. It's an ongoing exploration, one that encourages independent thought, critical examination, and perhaps a willingness to see the world and indeed the divine in an entirely new light. If you found this exploration as fascinating and thought-provoking as I did, and if it sparked some questions within you, some curiosity about these lost teachings, please do share this episode with anyone you think would benefit from this conversation. Share it with those who question the mainstream, with those who seek deeper meaning, or simply with anyone who's open to hearing a truly radical reinterpretation of our collective spiritual story. Your engagement helps these conversations reach further, challenging the concealment engine that has been at work for so long. We've only just scratched the surface of this profound body of work, and I'm keen to continue this conversation, to keep peeling back these layers. Thank you for joining me on this profound journey into the heart of the real revelation. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep seeking the gnosis that is rightfully yours.